Did you know that the Bible invites us to lament? It invites us to honest, no restraints expressions of our pain and disappointments and fears to God. It invites us into that. Did you know that a full 1/3 of the Psalms are lament psalms, complaints, expressions of pain and disappointment? And did you know that the Psalms are there for all of us to use and make our own prayers to pray in our own situations? Well, here's something I did not know. I planned this sermon series months ago, and I did not know that this would be the first Sunday that our church would be gathering after Helen Baraducci's death. I did not know that we would be in a place of needing lament, in a place of needing to express our disappointment and hurt. I did not know, but I believe God did. And I want to say that I am thankful and think that God led us here today with an appropriate reflection and service that meets us where we are at. Lament is an honest outpouring of where we are at, what we're feeling. It's a type of prayer that is a desperate cry out to God. Yet, lament is not what I grew up with in the church. Lament was just a weird concept. We were more interested in dismissing our sorrows than sitting in them. We were more interested in victory than suffering. I didn't grow up with any lament. I didn't grow up with lament being legitimate or encouraged or a recognized part of the faith journey and prayer. No one ever talked about it. Maybe it was the times I grew up in. Maybe it was toxic masculinity. Maybe it was just how people read Christianity and the Bible at the time. But lament was never something to be encouraged. And I don't think the message was put out there intentionally. It may be unintentional. But the unintentional message was that we were to put our happy faces on and to bury our emotions and to not cry. And you do that enough, and you think you forget that it's there, except it slips out in unexpected ways at just about the wrong time every time. And that iceberg of unresolved issues and pain and trauma just sits there like this silent force that is this guide and motivation to everything, like an unseen, unacknowledged rudder in our lives. So it's my conviction and my passion as we journey together as a church that we learn more and more to take our masks off before God and each other, to be real and authentic, and to discover those things hidden, those invisible things that lead to visible and unhidden relational and emotional damage all through life if they're not dealt with. Because if we learn to lament, we enter into a new intimacy with God, and we enter into a new understanding of ourselves that makes us more healthy and ultimately more like Jesus. Today, I want to invite you into lament, because lament is a best practice for our spiritual, emotional, and physical health. And with lament comes intimacy with God. And I hope that when we come to the end of this message and this service today, you feel ready to come before God in prayer in full authenticity and honesty and awareness of your situation, and give it up to Him. The psalm we're looking at is Psalm 142 that James just read. It's a psalm of David. And if anyone knew about pain and regret, sorrow and lament, it was David. He had a lot go on in his life that was painful. He went to war. He killed the enemy and saw the enemy kill his friends. He saw war crimes. He was rejected by King Saul, who was his father-in-law, who was so jealous of him, so threatened that he was chasing him and trying to kill him. Talk about a rough family situation. For David, it seemed like everyone, the whole world was against him, conspiring against him. He felt trapped, like there was no way out. So David laments. The setting for Psalm 142 is David alone in a cave, troubled, just feeling really overwhelmed. He's hiding from his enemies and feeling that the whole world is against him. He's huddled in there in this cave, in the silence, sitting in the dark cave among the dirt and rocks, with lots of time to be alone with his thoughts in the silence. David ended up here because he had to escape from Saul, so he fled. First, he went to a foreign land thinking he might be safe there, like some kind of political refugee. But this didn't work out either. Even the king of the foreign land didn't want David around. We read about this in 1 Samuel chapter 21, and it's unclear if this king knew who David was completely yet, but David thought they might find out, and David was afraid for his life again. So David, the text says, was very afraid of what King Achish of Gath might do to him. So he pretended to be insane, scratching on doors and drooling down his beard. So he flees from this situation too. And it seems like there is no safe place for him to go to. But he finds this cave. He goes to this cave called the Cave of Adullam. And he hides there all alone at this point. But now Saul is searching for him. His father-in-law, his king, to whom he had sworn fealty, is blinded in jealousy of David. And he's the actual madman, a man tortured by insecurities and vengeance. And Saul's enlisted 3,000 elite soldiers, special forces guys, to hunt David down. So that's why he's in this cave, lamenting and writing this psalm. He's reflecting on the injustices of the world, the unthinkable horrors and evil that people are capable of. This is what he was up against. This is the kind of evil and ruthlessness that was pursuing David, hemming him in. There was a village that had helped David, and Saul found out that they had helped David. So Saul had this ruthless killer with him. His name was Doeg, the Edomite. So this is what happens at the orders of King Saul. Doeg goes into the village by himself and kills everyone, because they had contact with David, because they gave him some food. This is what it says in 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 18 and 19. Doeg, the Edomite, turned on them and killed them that day. 85 priests in all, still wearing their priestly garments. Then he went to Nob, the town of the priests, and killed the priest families, men and women, children and babies, and all the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. That's what he was up against. That's why he is hiding and trapped. David had a lot to lament about. David knew pain. Psalm 142 is directly in that context where David was in this cave, a fugitive. It is a deep, profound invitation for us to enter into prayer and lament as King David did. Psalm 142 itself is broken down into two sections. There's a summary of his situation and what's going on in verses 1 to 4. And then there's the prayer in verses 5 to 7. And the prayer is what I want to focus on today. The prayer section, verses 5 to 7, you'll notice has three parts or three movements. There's a declaration of trust. There's a description of the situation and a desire expressed. And those three things, declaration, description, and desire, are the essence of prayers of lament. And I want to tell you why it's so important for us to pray this way. It makes us come to grips with things in our lives that we would rather push down. It challenges us to bring to the surface things that we would rather keep in the depths and hide. Because the human tendency is to avoid things that bring pain and embrace things that bring pleasure. It seems like it's the way we're wired. That's why we prefer eating a bag of chips to going for a run, most of us anyway. That's why we are, most of us, so proficient and skilled at procrastination, because why not do something fun first and leave the work till later, tomorrow? That's why so many of us get stuck in places in life, because we don't want to deal with things that cost us, that are painful, or take some effort. The prayer starts with a declaration of trust in verse 5. You are my place of refuge. You are all I really want in life. I want to tell you why it's important to make this declaration. David's not just yelling out randomly and complaining to the wind. He's directing his prayers to God. God is the only one who can take it. God is the appropriate person to express the deepest and darkest, most hidden things to. David is declaring that despite all things that are going on, he trusts God. He declares his trust in God. Then he moves from his declaration of trust to a description. It's an honest description of the situation. This is what he says. Hear my cry, for I am very low. Well, I would say that's pretty good economy of words. Maybe a bit understated. He's got an army hunting him. His father-in-law hates him, and he's sitting alone in the mud and rocks of a cave, and he is very low. But we get the situation. When he says he is very low, it's shorthand for all those things that we read before. And I don't know how long he was alone in this cave, but I imagine the cry of his heart, the pain, the sorrow, that stuff was coming out for hours and for days. And then a thought would hit him. He'd be fine one moment, and then a thought would hit him, and grief would wash over him like a tide. And he'd find himself shouting, yelling, even angry at God. This is unfair. Maybe holding his fist up. Why? Why me? Why this? In a prayer of lament, we are invited to describe with our whole being what the situation is. Invited to express how we feel about it, no matter how embarrassing or improper it might seem. After he's declared his trust in God and who he's praying to, after he pours out his heart and describes the situation, after he's run out of tears, after his voice is hoarse from yelling and crying out, he expresses his desire. He pleads with God for his desired outcome. He begs, rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison so I can thank you. The godly will crowd around me, for you are good to me. David wants to be rescued, to get out of this cave, to not feel that the whole world is caving in around him, chasing him. And his desire, his honest heart desire, is freedom, to be surrounded by good, godly people. His desired outcome is connected to the situation and honestly reflects the lament and desire of his heart. So that's what he prays. And I want to remind you that this whole time, probably in the back of his mind, is this. He remembers that he has been anointed by Samuel to be the king of Israel. He is God's chosen. Maybe not for the first time he thinks, was Samuel just a crazy old man? Why am I hiding in a cave? Did he actually know what he was talking about? Was he a false prophet? Look at my life. God's anointed? I don't know about that. But even in the midst of these doubts, those questions, he hangs on to that promise, even when it seems impossible to hang on. And he's only hanging on by a thread, but still it's enough. He expresses, he comes to God, he pours himself out, and God listens. His faith, joined now by hope, looks to the future. And David declares his trust in God, describes his pain, his situation, and expresses his desire. And that is the essence of this lament. We are invited to declare, describe, and desire change. Where are you at today? Do you feel like you are trapped? Do you feel like you're being pursued? Do you feel that all your hopes and dreams are being dashed? David did. Do you feel disappointed with the way your life turned out? Do you feel seeds of doubt growing in your mind? Or do you feel the deep, deep sorrow of loss? I want to invite you into lament as a practice, as a way of prayer, to declare your trust in God, to describe your situation, to express your desire. So this is how we start. We start with a declaration of trust. God, I trust you. God, you are my creator. God, it's to you I cry out. Whatever your words are. And I don't know where you're at today, but when you pray this, you were saying who you were lamenting to, and you were saying who you were directing all this stuff to, and who you trust. And then you're invited to move on to the description, an honest description of your situation. God, now that you know I'm talking to you, I've got some things that are bothering me, and I want you to listen. This is the part where you're invited to just get real with God, to express it all, to share things that you wouldn't share with anyone else. To be angry or sad, to be questioning or doubtful, to yell or cry. And I think this is the most challenging part for us. Maybe it feels foreign, uncomfortable, disrespectful. But I can assure you, God can take it, and he invites it. You know, even Jesus lamented. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 38, Jesus was talking about what he was about to go through in the crucifixion, and he told his friends, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And then he went to God with it and expressed all of this to God. Jesus was lamenting. What would you describe today? Is it something that's right in front of you? Is it something from your past? Is it a fear for the future? How would you describe, share the inner secrets of your soul to God? You're invited to. A lament starts with us declaring our trust in God, declaring who we're praying to, and then to the description, to describe what's going on, to honestly express the deepest longings of our soul. And honesty is expressed that even we may not be aware of until we start praying and get in the habit of reaching for those things so we can bring them to God. And then we move on to our desire. We move from declaring trust, describing our situation, to the desire of what we want to happen, how we want God to step in. David said in the Psalm, rescue me. Release me from this bondage. Surround me with godly people. That was his prayer. That was his desire. And it came out of the description. It came out of what he was facing. What's your desire? How do you need God to step in? What's your prayer of lament? We all have them. It might be rooted right here in the present. It might be something that happened to you in the past that you pushed down and never dealt with. It might be anxiety or fear for the future. Whatever it is, along with David, we declare hope and trust in the living God. We declare that Jesus went before us and sits at the right hand of God, hearing us and listening to us. And we believe that God sent his Spirit to help us pray, to guide us, and to expose things that have been hidden, to heal. Let's take that step. Let's lament. Let's trust God and see what he will do when we come to him.